Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. Thank you guys for being a part of College Knowledge. Just a reminder, if you're sending your student to school, visit elitecollegiateplanning.com for free resources and to book a free consultation. Hey everybody, welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Joe Kearns.
Always a pleasure to be here with you, Dave.
Yes, it is. And today we have the pleasure of interviewing Shaun Carver from the University of California, Berkeley. And Shaun, welcome to the show, first of all. And secondly, Shaun is the executive director of the International House at UC Berkeley. So, Shaun, welcome to the show. And give us a little background on what the International House is and what it's designed for and what you do there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Nice to meet you both and a pleasure to be here. So really, International House goes back to 1908. That's the original founding of the idea of International House. And it, our origin story starts with a man named Harry Edmonds who was walking down the steps of the Columbia Library in New York City and passed a student on the stairs. And as he walked by, as you do back then, you would say good morning. And the student kind of stopped and looked at him strange. So it sparked a conversation. And so Harry and the student started talking, and the student said, I'm from China. I've been in New York for 3 weeks, and you're the first person to talk to me. And so, Harry felt very empathetic towards that, didn't feel like we were doing a very good job as a culture to welcome international folks, these scholars that were coming to study. And so then they started inviting international students into their home, Harry and Florence Edmonds, into their modest apartment. And that started to build this community in New York. Of international scholars, as well as people of New York who wanted to interact with someone from Nepal, someone from China, someone that they hadn't, been exposed to before. And so this really great community had developed of supporting international students and recognizing the benefit you have when you surround yourself with different people from different backgrounds, and all these great conversations that happened over dinner and sharing their backgrounds. That's when John D. Rockefeller Jr. stepped in, and he funded the first International House, which is right next to Columbia University. It houses about 600 international and domestic students. In New York, they service every university. So you could be at NYU, you could be at Columbia, you could be at Fordham, you could be at the music college across the street. But you live together, eat together. There's programming to just bring this international community together. It was such a success. They came to Berkeley. 1930 is when we opened up here on the Berkeley campus, right across the street from the law school. And for almost 100 years, we've been bringing international and domestic students together in the idea of better understanding. And it's fantastic. We house right now about 620 residents, about 20% are domestic, 80% are international. In that population, we have over 75 different nationalities represented. There's no dominant culture. There's no groupthink. We have so much diversity on every topic. It's really fantastic. And that's what we do. And we've been doing it for a long time. Our alumni consists of 7 Nobel Prize winners, governors of California, Supreme Court justices in California, people in the United Nations. I mean, our alumni are really fantastic, and they all feel very passionate about their experience here.
Awesome. So, because this is what I do, first question. There's been a lot of unrest on college campuses over the last year or so, right? And some of it national, international. U.S. is having its own issues. How has that affected the students that come from overseas and are in a community like that at the International House?
Yeah, the first thing I would say, I totally agree. The environment on campuses around the world, but particularly here in the U.S., has been very divisive, and confrontational.
Yeah.
And as you look back in the last 6 months, with what's been going on college campuses, how much have you read about what's happening at Berkeley?
I've seen some.
But very little, right? I mean, Columbia, Washington, USC. I mean, those are the campuses that you're seeing a lot. And here's Berkeley, the center of the free speech movement. Where we had political unrest. We have a reputation for protesting, and we haven't been on the front pages of the media about violence on campus. It's been handled very, very well here, and I would hope that iHouse has had a little bit of a part of that.
Yeah.
We have so much diversity. I have Palestinian, I have Israelis, I have Russians, I have Ukrainians. In the past we've had Pakistanis and Indians. These people live together. Sometimes they share rooms together. They dine together. We don't see the conflict that we've seen around campus. We're seen as one community with different perspectives. And so, these conversations about the Middle East are happening here at iHouse, but they happen over our dining room, every night. And people are having civil conversations, and people who don't necessarily fall into one camp or the other are trying to listen to both sides and trying to form their own opinion. I think it's a very healthy way of dealing with these conflicts. And that's why we exist, which is, if you understand these issues and understand that we're all coming from these different perspectives, and we all want a safer world, we all want a better life for ourselves and our families. How do we move forward without confrontation? How do we move forward and find solutions that don't mean the elimination of people who disagree with us? Mm-hmm. And so, it's been a very healthy, we have seen no conflict within iHouse, even though we have a lot of conflict, as you see in these campus communities. So I think we deal with it in a healthy way. And I hope we serve as a bit of an example of how we should handle these situations. Understand it's a complicated world and people have different perspectives, and we have to respect everybody and come in, bring your point of view, listen to others, and try to work together in finding a common ground where we can move forward.
Yeah, I mean, the civil discourse is a lost art right now, which is a shame, because it's how learning happens, right? It's how points of view are perceived, and it's how you grow as a human through the perspective and lens of others. And if you can't have the conversation, you can never have the lens. You can never see the perspective or the point of someone else.
100% agree with you. And if you look at some of the things I see happening that I think are really unhealthy and don't make great campus communities, is that the loss of free speech. How can we learn if people aren't going to be open to hearing something that's different than what they already believe? And if you say, look, I think the term people are using, intellectually arrogant, this is my view, I'm right, everyone else is wrong, and you can't move me off this position. If everyone's like that, this is just not a good path that we're on. You have to be able to listen to others. You have to say, look, I don't agree with you, and that's fine, but I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to try to understand where you're coming from. And that's what we should be. It's not about group, trying to indoctrinate or convince people. It's just exposing yourself to all of the different views around the world, and then, being more informed in your own opinion.
Yeah, and it's crazy because we've done 180 different interviews with officials all over the country and high-ranking officials at colleges, and the groupthink, the indoctrination, if you will, and then the what you read on the internet as gospel is just it boggles the mind, because. And now with the AI capabilities, someone can spread a message of complete falsehoods, and whoever the observer is, right? We've lost this idea of, well, let me research that. Let me dig in a little bit before I just lean to this and I draw the line in the sand and this is the way it is and this is what I heard, so I'm just going to go with it.
Yeah. I recently had an interview with one of our alumni, which was Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, and very much on the front line of AI. And I grew up. My dad was in the tech industry, and so I grew up around technology. I'm a an early adopter of a lot of technology. I remember before ATMs and how difficult life was when you had to go to a bank or a grocery store to cash a check just to get money. I've seen how technology has changed our lives for the better, but I'm concerned about AI. And when I was sitting there on the stage with Eric, I was like, I used to be this like tech optimist, right? That technology is going to make our lives better. But I think I was lost in social media. That technology is not making our lives better. Social media is not making our lives better. These algorithms are funneling people down into these rabbit holes of groupthink. And for some, human nature is apparently, you either stare at kittens because it gives you this endorphin rush or whatever, or you stare at things that make you outraged. And so the algorithm is trying to funnel you towards one of those polar opposites, right? Which is, and so many people just go into these, are just getting fed constant information that enrages them. Yeah. And then here we are. And then here we are with this polarized world. And, it really needs to change. People are not open and willing to have conversations with people who disagree with them. They just want to shout each other down and say, you're evil. And it's like, no, they grew up in a different culture or a different country. They have different perspectives. They have different value systems. It doesn't mean they're better or worse. They just recognize this world is crazy diverse, and people coming out of those environments just have different points of views. It doesn't mean they're evil, and we should listen and we should try to understand.
Yeah, and that's that. Again, I go back to I don't know where I learned it. I was very private education I was forced to read the books and do the report, like just nonstop, like in the library all the time. And somewhere along the way, I was taught that if you want to grow as a human and an entrepreneur and a business owner, and you want to be successful, you have to understand the perspective of others. You have to see things from a different lens. And when you talk about these algorithms driving people down a rabbit hole not to give them a different lens, to do the exact opposite of that, is to solidify whatever perspective is going to give them that endorphin release. And if you listen to any of the medical professionals talking about the endorphin release, similar to a drug or dopamine release in what you get when you're just fed what you want to be fed, or what they think you want to be fed, is crazy. So again, I think it all comes to perspective. So I love the idea of you got people across all different cultures and religions and backgrounds sitting at a table, dining together and breaking bread, right? And having civil discourse. I mean, it's amazing.
Well, the idea of breaking bread goes back way beyond IELTS. Yeah. For thousands of years, sitting down over a meal is how you share and how you build relationships with people. And it's not the cheapest thing in the world right now to be running a dining hall, serving 19 meals a week for 620 students. It's a very expensive venture, but I will never stop doing it because, when I talk to my alumni, the memory, when I ask them, like, what did you learn here, and where did you learn it? When you became more aware of other cultures, more sensitive to your behaviors and their behaviors, and how you can, improve your cultural competency. It's all the social things. It's sitting down, like you said, breaking bread upstairs, sitting down, having a meal after a hard day of school, and just having these conversations. Hey, what do you think about what's going on in the Middle East? And getting all of these different perspectives from folks. And because we don't have we're obviously in the United States, we're here around the Berkeley campus. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Within these walls, we don't have a dominant culture. I have 20%. That's my biggest population of anything, probably, is domestic students. I have 20%. But if you look at domestic students, it's not like all of them have groups think the same thing. I mean, if you look at, the United States population, there's people all over the place. And so there's not even the same view within that 20% population domestic. And then I've got, these 74 other countries represented here that are not more. Our biggest, I think, is China, which is about 9%, India about 8%, I think France is 7%. It varies each year, but no one is more than 10%. So you sit down at a table, no matter who you are, you probably have 7 or 8 people around you who think differently than you, have spoke a different language, different culture, different food, different religion, different gender. I mean, we manufacture diversity, complexity in our community, so that there is no one feels comfortable. This place is, as Carol Dweck, this is the growth mindset, right? Like, Everybody's out of their comfort zone. No one feels like, home. I mean, I think we try, you know what I mean? Like, there's just not that safety of, oh, these are my people. It's like, no one here is your people.
Right.
And that makes you a little bit more vulnerable. It makes you a little bit more open to hearing other people. And what comes out is tremendous. It gets overused to talk about transformation, but I talked to alumni that were here in 1947, right? Coming out of the war, and they said, 1947 at iHouse was one of the most important years of my life. I was sitting at a dinner table, and there was a Japanese student and a German student. And, 3 years before, we were at war with each other, trying to kill each other. Now they're my friends. Now we sit down, we talk about that experience. We're all part of one community now. And that's extremely powerful. Those types of things stick with you for a long time. And
I gotta just throw the plug because you said it. If anybody hasn't read Mindset by Carol Dweck, one of the most phenomenal books out there, and it rewrites what everybody thought, just from what it takes to grow as an individual professional and all that. So fantastic book.
I was an athlete younger in my much younger days. And I wish I would have read that before, because, you push yourself until you're kind of like, oh, but it's pushing yourself beyond the quitting point. This is where you grow. No one is born running a marathon, right? You start, right? When I started running, it was, can I do a mile? Can I do 3 miles? Can I do 5 miles? And then eventually you did a half marathon. It doesn't happen because I just decide to do it. You got to continually push yourself beyond what you think you can do. And that's how you get there. And that's so true in relationships. It's true in your business and your work and education and learning. You just gotta do the work. And I think a lot of people, what they're falling into right now is they don't want to do the work of learning about other people's perspectives. They don't want to do the work of trying to understand somebody else.
Or the research, or people want to take everything at surface level. And I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, a couple of things that I want to chime in with. Number one, I think there's a valuable lesson in learning to being comfortable, being uncomfortable in all aspects of life. But I think the one thing you mentioned, like, okay, Berkeley's not front and center, not front page, and there's a lot of colleges that are. And to hear what you're saying, I would say is not what you typically, I'll say the general perspective of the mainstream media of what college is right now. It is more of that indoctrination type feeling that I think a lot of people have an opinion about. So is part of the culture that I love hearing, the critical thinking, the discussions, being able to disagree without anger, right? Is that something that goes towards the application process, then making sure the students that are on campus are the right type of student? Or is it kind of like teaching them the right ways? And if they kind of stray to that path where we want to shut down your speech, you shut down that aspect. How do you get there?
Yeah, one thing I just want to comment on quickly. You mentioned that some of these campuses, what was happening on these campuses was just horrible for everybody. There was no winners in that whole situation. The campus leadership, administration, the campus security, the community, the students. I mean, no one won in those situations.
Right.
But I think my understanding, in talking to campus leaderships of Berkeley as well as other campuses as well, a big issue was wasn't always the campus community. It was the outside agitators. People outside the university. It wasn't the students. It was people outside in the community that saw the university, what was happening at the universities, as a cause to join. And they probably had a different agenda than what the students did. We had peaceful protests here. We had a camp. We had tents. But they were civil, and they were able to express their views. They were able to, have communication with administration that was healthy, and eventually led to, a resolution. But it wasn't disruptive to campus. It was a peaceful protest, and I think if that happens on every campus, that's great. That's student advocacy. That's students getting involved and taking action. But what happened on these campuses was just violence, and and a lot of it was instigated from folks outside the campus communities. So I think that's one of the difference here versus USC or Washington or Columbia, was that we didn't get outside agitators coming into this campus, which I think put us on a different path, a much more healthier path. So,
is there anything that was, sorry, I was just curious, is there anything that was done to stop that? I mean, was there efforts to make sure, like, hey, if that's the problem, we want to make sure that that doesn't happen here? Or was it just they didn't come there because that culture is a little different?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's not like they set up, perimeter and kept people out. These are open campuses in the middle of cities, so, and they're public places, so people can come and go. And so, yeah, I don't know why we didn't. To be honest, when I saw what was happening in Columbia, in my mind, I was getting ready for something similar here. At Berkeley, we just have, People's Park is down, and the issues we have People's Park, and tear gas, being thrown into these student protests by the National Guard, and all of the horrible things there. I was envisioning that, and it never happened. And so, I think as we look back, there's going to be a lot of learning from the universities, as how do we allow healthy student protests, give them the right of free speech, give them the right to advocate, but do it in more peaceful, civil ways. So like I said, I hope in some ways being on the campus and being, that's what we do, is that some of that was influenced by our house. But it's
and sometimes it's better to be lucky. Being honest, like, if it didn't show up, had it shown up, who knows what would have gone down. But regardless, I want to jump into some stuff that I think is our listeners are all college-bound students. I think we've got listeners internationally. We've got a really nice reach. So the first thing, like, how does the financial aid system work for international students? Is there a financial system for them? Is it essentially, if you can afford, you can come, if you can get in? Just talk through that a little bit for us.
Yeah, it's, even talking to domestic students here in the United States, the cost of education is just really difficult sometimes to make the case of why it's worthwhile to go to university. And then you look at, here at Berkeley, international tuition is 2.5 times that of a domestic student, and they're coming from a country that may be developing. I remember I did a policy change that allowed free meals, extra meals for our residents within the house. Instead of limiting their meal swipes, we just took the brakes off and said, if you're hungry, come here and eat. And for our residents that are on the lower end of our economic spectrum, a huge difference. I remember getting this email from a student saying, I come from a country, my parents are doctors, to make $1 a day. Like, I can't go down the street and even do fast food every day. That's like a week's worth of work for my parents. And so the change was really meaningful. And then you think about international tuition at Berkeley is $26,000. It's a $16,000 supplement for non-residents. And then put that on someone who's coming from a developing country. These are just tremendous expenses. And because they're not U.S. citizens, there's no federal or state aid that they can apply to, like domestic students can. Scholarships and financial aid through the universities are limited for international students. And then so they have to look at either doing it personally or taking out loans, which, being in the industry, that some of these loans are predatory. And
some. Most.
Yeah. And so it's just astronomical that, challenges facing folks financially to come here. Not that, and that doesn't even count the cost of living here. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and unfortunately, there just aren't the resources available to international students as there are. There's some out there, and look, some of the universities are much better at working and advising and supporting international students. Some of them have merit or merit-aware kind of options for them. But yeah, it is a.
You're also in a tough. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just saying you're also in a tough spot as a the California school system, right? It's a taxpayer funded system. It's difficult to just say, hey, you pay, we'll educate them. Not meaning them as it just people that don't pay taxes, right? So it's a tough gig.
Well, so I have two young children. They're 10 and 12. So, we're starting to think about, how we're going to fund college education. I'm a California resident, born and raised in California. And, I get it. Like, I want my kids to go to Berkeley. Like, why wouldn't I? It's the number one public university in the world. And then I look at the cost and I'm like, wow, and I'm paying taxes, a lot of, what I feel like a lot of taxes every year.
Oh yeah. You're more than us.
More than most.
Yeah.
And I would, if my son or daughter lost a place for an international student, I would feel a bit miffed, right? I've been paying into the system for as long as I've been working, over 40 years.
100%.
And now they can't reap the benefits of that. At the same time, I'm being part of, the university and administration and understanding that state budgets for the university is going down, but costs are going up. And how do you balance the budget? And when you have an international student paying 2.5 times for every domestic, how do you not lean on that? Mm-hmm. And so I think, you see the state of California is a little different. They put in some caps for international, or some guidelines for caps on the University of California to try to balance that domestic versus international student ratio. But it's, I see it on both sides. I try to be understanding and like, well, we got to find this balance point where we recognize the financial benefit we have of international students, but also the learning environment is much better when you have what we talked about earlier, diversity in the classroom. When you can have a conversation where people feel free and open to express their views, that's better for everybody. And we want that, but at the same time, like I probably paid my daughter's tuition several times over by now.
Right? So
and we haven't even got in yet.
Yeah, I have a real question that it just popped in my brain as you're talking about it, because one of the things that we talk about with families is we're outside of Philadelphia, right? So we're a country away from each other, and a lot of southern schools, southern East Coast, even some of the sort of mid-southern schools, they really enjoy the Northeast the students, for whatever reason. They make it very worth their while to take a trip to University of Alabama or Auburn or schools like that, right? And one of the things I've always told people is, when you get a student to leave hometown and go to Alabama, they're adding to that economy. And oftentimes those schools have job placement where they're going to get you in different corporations and all that. So I tell people, like, the schools are incentivized to get good students from other places to their campus because they become part of the economy of that campus and that town and that state, right? So parlaying that to an international student, they come to the US. What percentage of the students that come to the US, get educated in the US, stay in the US and work for US companies and do that? Or do they take their education and go back to where they came from?
Yeah, I think I think the point you raise is excellent. And, being here in Silicon Valley and in San Francisco Bay Area, you look at Silicon Valley, I think of almost 60% of the startups in Silicon Valley, were founded by an immigrant, someone who came over to this country with the idea and had the opportunity to create these incredible businesses that we rely on. And a third of those came over on a student visa. So they come to the universities, they get trained up, and yes, because this area, our economy is very much focused on innovation, entrepreneurship, and startup. They come over here, they get the education, they get the network, they get the support, and they launch these incredible companies that have had incredible impact on the economy here. I am, again, I have two hats. One is a father looking at the competition for a seat in a selective university, but the impact of taking the best from around the world, bringing them there, giving them an education and an opportunity. They'll, for every one international student, they'll create 8 jobs, right, in the local economy. That's incredible. And so you're exactly right. Before here, I was at UC San Diego, and if you look at the San Diego economy, the impact that University of California, San Diego had on the local economy, it's in the billions and billions of dollars in supporting the local economy. It's not just.
If you didn't know, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Elite Collegiate Planning. Make sure to share and tag us.
40,000 students, and the economic. They need a place to live, a place to eat. They need a cell phone. They need services. All of the revenue generated just by being in the area and being a student. But also look at the research coming out of the universities and the businesses that are being spawned. Qualcomm, which is probably in all of our cell phones. There's a Qualcomm chip in there, or at least there used to be. That started out of a research with faculty at the university. All of the biotech industry in San Diego spawned out of the university. And so the economic impact of these universities into the local economy is huge. And you're absolutely right. It's a brain drain when you take someone from the South and say, I want to get this Ivy League degree, or I want to be in the Northeast where all these great schools are. They get established, they get a network, they get a job, and they go back on vacation to visit their family. And then all the other benefit is in the areas, and so
100%.
Especially with international students, I spent 13 years in China working with international students in international education that we're supporting them going to universities in the US, UK, Australia, Canada, all over. And so, it's hearing what their motivations are. Some of them, you do want to go get a degree and then come back, maybe work for a family business or, get a job in their home country, but they want that international education. Some of them want to, see this as a path to immigration. I want to get a degree. I want to do OPT or CPT. I want to get an H-1B, and I want to establish myself, and I want to have a new life in this new country. And so, it's universities can't just look at this transactionally. They're coming in, get a degree, send them home. That
would be the worst, in my opinion, of the outcomes. Meaning everybody comes here, gets educated, goes home. Like I would want listen, I'm not going to get political here, but every single war that this country has ever had, every single war of every dominant country in history has taken the best and brightest from those countries and given them a place to think and work and do in their society. So if we can do it in a peaceful way, which this is, right? This isn't having to go give people asylum. It's a way to get some people that earn it, want it, and are willing to do it to come here. I think that's a huge fact and a huge point to make, because God knows nobody wants to go to another war, right? This is, we're on the brink of insanity in this country, and that's not the outcome that anybody wants.
Yeah.
You made a comment about your 13 years in China, and part of your role was to get students to US, Australia, Canada. In that light, how do international students, do they hire counselors? Do they hire advisors? How does that whole process work? Because I want to show you a tool that we created at the College Planning Network that sort of lays out a lot of information that we've actually dialed it into the information that we think is useful in the admissions process and the financial process. But how does it work in the distances?
Yeah, so that's we could do a whole nother hour podcast on that topic alone. But I think the challenge, how they do it is a lot through intermediary. In China, and I can speak specifically in China because that's where my background was. That's where a lot of my experience was. The decision maker is the parents. It's not the kid. It's the parents who will decide the major and the university. And if you're a parent in China and you don't speak English, which a lot of that generation doesn't, brand names like Harvard or Stanford or Oxford or Cambridge, but you don't know much about the university. You don't know the culture. You don't know necessarily what colleges are strong, which programs are better than others. But the brand names because they're all for all of us, they're all aspirational, universities. So how do you get information about universities, the application process? You can't most of these universities don't have a website tailored to Chinese parents so that they can go on and do the research. So they rely a lot on these agencies or agents to be an intermediary and advise the parents on where to go. One of the frustrations I had, if you look at UK system, is that UK universities can pay a commission to these agents for sending students to them. And so there's this incentive for an agent to send somebody to one university versus the other because there's a financial benefit for that. And if you look at the pyramid of universities, the top ranked tier 1 universities, they don't need to pay to get students. Berkeley's got a 5% acceptance rate. We don't need more applicants. But if you go down to the tier 2, tier 3, which are, as we talked about earlier, they're looking for international students to help prop up their budgets, but they're not getting enough applications. Yeah, they would pay to get more students coming their way. And so there's just this, there's a incentive problem, which is, as an agent would advise a parent, and they say, look, here's 10 schools you can apply to. Here's the ones I recommend. Well, what are you going to recommend? The higher ranked school that doesn't pay a commission to the agent, or the lower ranked school, which is giving 8% of the tuition back to the agent? Of course. And so I think the model was always kind of funneling students down, not to the best university they get into, but the one that incentivizes the agent. And that model brings a lot of unethical, bad decisions and bad outcomes for folks. Since I've left, China has done a lot to clean up that industry. In the last 7-8 years, China's actually done a lot to address education inequity by limiting, getting more control on those agents as well. But no, I mean it's a problem. They just need the information. Because if I was asked any of your listeners outside China, tell me the difference between Tsinghua and Beida. 2 top universities, the Harvard and Stanford of China, the Cal of China. What do you know about it? What do you know about Peking University or Tsinghua University? Right? Probably no one could tell you. I would need someone to come and explain it to me. And that's the situation they're facing when they look at US or Australia or Canada or UK. They need someone to help explain the difference between MIT, which is very different than Harvard. Science and technology, I'd want to go to MIT. So a lot of it is done through intermediaries, which can be a problem. Could not always lead to the best result. So
I just want to share the screen for a second here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. Can you see this?
Yes.
So we developed a platform basically, and I'm going to put in, let's see if I can pull you up just for funsies. I spelled it wrong, didn't I?
E-L-E-Y.
Yeah.
E-L-E-L-E-Y.
There you go. There it is.
And then you just got to scroll down.
Yeah.
All right.
There we go.
University of California, Berkeley. So all I did was we have financial information in here. So we put in a mock family to make $200,000. They've got a couple $100,000 in assets, and student doesn't work. And so I populated their EFC, or what is now known as the SAI, right?
Yeah.
And then it shows immediately, like, here's your price. This is what the sticker price of the school is. Here's what the estimated family cost would be. Here's how much need you qualify for. And here you get it. But then we go in and a couple of things that I just like about this. And the reason I'm putting this out there is because this tool is built to tell you the nuts and bolts. It's not built. I don't rank schools. I don't believe in school rank. And I know you've said you guys are number 1. Great. But I guarantee I can get just as good an education at a school that's ranked number 5, right? It comes down to the student, in my opinion, right?
100%. I did my MBA at a state school, I'm a big believer. And, and coming from the business school world, I was at the business school at UC San Diego previously. How do you rank a university? How do you compare one university to the other? Like, it's so subjective that
it's so subjective. It's insanely subjective. And it's the part of it that I look at is, first of all, you'd have to define success, and we'd have to have a single blanket of what success is, right? Well, success for one person may be helping hungry children in Africa. Success for another person may be making billions of dollars. And so you can't then say, well, I got a great education because I helped all these kids but we rank it based on income or assets or something like that. So it's just bizarre. But a couple of things I look at, I always look at the college, the return on investment, if it's reported. In this case, it's not reported. I look at the amount of debt people have to take out to graduate from these schools. And then I really want to bust into the financial aid information, like where's it coming from? And I got the point that you made, which I think is resounding, is that international doesn't get the same treatment of the US. And people in the US have this fictitious belief. I read an article the other day, it says only 36% of the population right now believes that a college education is worth it. That is just absolutely mind-numbing that we would look at it that way. And it's because of the price inflation of schools. But what people don't realize is just because the price inflation is there, the amount of awards that are given out, the amount of financial aid that exists, the amount of merit scholarships and private scholarships and athletic scholarships that exist now are more than ever. So yeah, you see this price of an increase in tuition, but you also see this massive increase in amount of money given out each year, right? So it's like, I don't know, $55 billion in free money is given out every year. And what do you actually pay, right? The average financial aid package at Berkeley is $30,000. So you're not actually paying that 76 for the average family. And I think the reason we populate this information this way is try and bust through the mind-numbing idea of spending $400,000 on an undergraduate degree. It's not actually how it's done. There's an actual system to it. And so we talk about the best academic, social, and financial fit, right? That to us is the best fit school. You've got to have the academic, you've got to have the social, but then that financial piece has to be considered.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What I really like about what you're doing is that you're giving people the information so that they can make a good decision. And like, the issue I was saying with the Chinese parents is they don't have access to the information. And so the information is all getting filtered through somebody who's trying to, guide them. And I don't want to throw a blanket over everybody. There's a lot of people doing really good work and really helping students. But there's some that are not helping them, that are filtering the information to make sure that the outcome benefits themselves and not necessarily the family or the student. So I think this is wonderful. I think it's really great that people have access, and I'm a firm believer about fit.
Absolutely.
Some of the things you talk about, like, coming from a business background, and it's to me, education, it's the ROI equation. Like, is there a return on investment? Yes, you're going to put $100,000 into getting an MBA. However, we can see that you're going to make $20,000 a year more for the rest of your career. That more than pays for the cost of education, and you can justify it. If it's I got $150,000 worth of debt, and I have a job that is not
paying $45,000 a year.
Yeah, and as I look, international education, you look at Germany, they're trade schools. Not everybody is going to higher education to get a degree. A lot of them realize that's not for me. That's not a good fit for me. That's not my path. I'm going to go learn a trade. And, there's plumbers, electricians, carpenters. There's people that are making, well over six figures a year without carrying, $100,000 worth of student loan debt. So I think in the U.S. we've kind of fallen into this pattern, which is that, you either go to university or, you're going to be a manager at McDonald's. The fact is there's some really, we've lost that working class. We're kind of on this elite, elitism of higher education. And I think universities have to also account that the rise in tuition over the last 20 years has been crazy, and that makes this ROI equation much more difficult. And the way we've been handing out student loans, and putting people into these debt situations that now we have to write off as a country, it just doesn't make sense. I do think higher ed is in this period where the model has to change. The financial model of these universities, I don't think is that sustainable, and they're going to have to kind of pivot and readjust what that model looks like to make sure that the students aren't overburdened with the increasing costs of these universities.
Well, and I mean, just to that point, I think if you go on any college campus over the last 20 years, there has been an explosion in construction and buildings and housings and all. Like, at some point, right? Stick to your guns. This is who we are. This is what we do. If you want this, come here. We'll do it. We'll do it as good as anyone. But there's this sort of like, it's this standard growth beyond like you rise to your level of incompetence, right? So you do too much, you go too far, and you all of a sudden your vision, your mission, your message is distorted because now you have to reevaluate it.
Well, I think there's definitely some competition.
I want to hear it.
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, but I think that the reality is that the colleges are competing to get the students. That's the client, that's the moneymaker. And so if you have school A, your school is putting in the rock wall and doing all this, and your applications are more than I better go, well, we got to build something that's going to counteract that because we're not going to get students. I mean, I think that's, I don't want to say part of the problem, but there is competition between schools and they're trying to keep up with the Joneses type thing.
Well, I was talking to someone yesterday about Canada, the situation in Canada, right? And so Canada is trying to restrict or cap international students coming in because of the impact they're having on the housing. So that, they need a place to live. The university doesn't have enough housing facilities for them. So they move into the communities, which increases rent rates, pushes other people out. It's a big issue. And, when you look at Canada, the increase in the number of international students going to Canada is like almost doubled in the last 6 or 7 years. What hasn't caught up is the infrastructure to support those students. I think the universities want these international students, want the increase in revenue, but they didn't reinvest that into these capital projects to make sure I can provide housing, or I put in the support systems that international students need on campus. And so, I think it's not a drug, but I think they've just been leaning on the fact that, hey, let's bring in more international students that will help raise the improve the budgets of these universities. But they haven't, or at least haven't caught up with doing exactly what you said, which was to build housing for them and build support systems for them. And so then you're in this situation now, which is like, oh, well, we got to cap it. So I think that we don't get into we're not good at managing slow incremental changes. It seems like we need to have crisis on one side and crisis on the other, and draconian kind of policies back and forth to get this pendulum swinging back and forth, which is like, okay, look, we're going to increase enrollment 10%. That's going to be another 500 students. We need to add more beds to support those students.
We're going to do it over the next 10 years, right? Like that. That's the stuff to me that's like, okay, have a mission, have the long range plan, and execute. I also want to say that tool that I just used in front of you, that's $200 a year. Anybody in the world can buy it, and they can have access to it, and they look at any school in the US. So international students, if you're out there and you want to know how it actually works, go ahead, collegeplanningnet.com.
Well, and I think, before that, it is, people need to understand fit. That you may have heard about Harvard. You may have heard about Harvard your entire life. Everybody talks about they want to go to Harvard. You need to go do the research and understand, one, if you can get in. Two, is it really a good fit for you? Is it, are they strong in the area that you want to study? Does it, the campus environment, make you feel comfortable and supportive? Is there, opportunities for you to get a job in that? You need to look at all the things that make fit and not just buy into the brand names.
We say, it's a great saying we love to use, is fit, not fame.
Yeah.
Focus on the school's fit, not the school's fame.
That's so hard though, right? You have family back home in your home country. They want to say, my son or daughter are studying at a university everyone recognizes. And, I think it's, especially in cultures where face is a big thing, they want to be able to say their kid is studying at a name brand university. And so there's just a lot of pressure to buy into the brand. But I think as information gets out, people make better fit decisions, and they have and they look at the long road. This is the
internet. I was going to say, international down the shore. Everyone can't wait to get the flag out on the shore house or at the bumper sticker. I mean, that's everywhere. Parents want to showboat, and again, it's, do you want your child to be successful, happy, or what's more important?
Oh, I'm sure the student store sells a the student store down the street sells a lot of Berkeley mom or Berkeley dad T-shirts and sweatshirts and bumper stickers. I mean, look at who isn't proud when their kids can get into these really fantastic and highly selective universities. I mean, people have to be realistic about what it takes to get into these universities. And I don't know if I know it's from the university side, it's hard to find fit. At these universities, the applicants are really good at writing essays that you want to hear, right? And now you got ChatGPT, write me an admissions letter to Berkeley Law. Like, it'll spit out a beautiful one that will be very much aligned with what probably the admissions folks are looking for. So how do you find fit? How do you, in the application, how do you identify this person fits the culture and the ideals of our university, and that's the person we want to admit? It's just very, as we talked about, like with rankings, it's very subjective, and there's no science to it.
No, and it's funny too, because we've had this conversation with several experts in the field, and my belief is that the college fit for both sides, right? You want the match. We're going to have to get back to real face-to-face, more interview type stuff, because you just can't, you don't know, right? Anybody. We had who was the professor that was on? He said he hasn't read a poorly written essay in 2 years.
Right.
And he knows they're all perfect. It's like now that he's got to change how he grades them once he looks at it, because he knows the ChatGPT is going to fix any of the thought process that wouldn't align. So it's not actually the individual that's the good writer. It's now how do they connect the dots, and he's like incorporating his grading with ChatGPT. So knowing that they've got this help and support, how good are their points that they connect, and how good does the flow work? But yeah, I mean.
And and we talk about trying to get more holistic, right, admissions. You look at the whole person, not just someone who specializes in one area and is extremely strong, but someone who's got this breadth of experience. How do you weigh someone who's a level 9 pianist with someone who won a debate competitions or a state kind of, how do you weigh those things as a stronger candidate? It's just not it's an art. It's not a science. I hope that. I see AI as a tool for good and a tool for evil. Hopefully, AI can help. Look at all of these things in ways that we're not able to do. I mean, the processing power means that they can read everybody's essay. It can be looking for fit across so many different variables that we can't as individuals. So I don't know. I hope it all kind of gets a little bit better, and we can make sure that people are fits with these choices, which are life-changing decisions about what university, what you're studying, and your career path.
Yeah, and I think the other piece it's not always just a struggle as a fit from the student's perspective, from the college perspective, but the other big piece that the colleges have to do, again, you have to keep the lights on. So if you focus so much on the students who are the right fit, are you not accepting enough students to fill the bed, to pay the bills, right? You still have to admit students are going to have a high chance of actually enrolling in your school, right? I mean, that's the other aspect. It's not just about finding that fit, but also, hey, if you fit this mold, but only 50% of those people come to the school, well, how many? That means I got to figure out more people to accept. Now I have to start. Maybe you're not in the mold, but now you come here for 2 years and you don't finish. Like it is hard. It's not hard. It's not easy from any perspective.
Yeah, I think international students at Berkeley, we have about a 5% acceptance rate, right? And so I see that. Look, if I'm on the student side, and I'm looking at Berkeley, I'm going to apply to 20 schools because I've only got a 5% chance of getting into Berkeley. Sure. I need a plan B. And then I see students who, on social media, you'll see, they got accepted to 10 Ivies and they have over, $3 million of financial aid and scholarship. And I'm like, what a waste of time and resources for 9 of those schools, because they're only going to pick one, but everyone had to go through the process. Everybody had to go through the evaluation. Everyone had to put a financial package together for that student and give them the offer. And so, it seems like, a very shotgun approach to choosing a university. So it's it just feels like there's a lot of efficiencies we can build into every. It's like if you match up the right student with the right, you look at fit. Maybe you only need to apply to 5 because the acceptance rates are better, and you don't have to apply to 20, right?
Well,
but
it's funny too, because that example you just gave, like, you got into all the Ivies, you got into Stanford, you got into Berkeley, you got into pick MIT. Like, which one's top of the list there, guy?
And they're so different, right? I mean, there's
right.
so diversity. It's like, well, what major did you apply to that all of those schools have a major?
Impossible. Impossible. That's such a good point.
And even if you look at, my world was the MBA administration and MBA programs, it was like, MBA at Cal, even though it's University of California, at Haas here, is much different than the MBA program at UC San Diego at the Rady School. And because it supports the local economics. And so very much, entrepreneurship, innovation, startup culture up here. Down there, it was a lot of bio. We would have medical doctors taking MBAs. All of these, and then you go geographically on the other side of the continent where you guys are. All these programs are very different. They have all different flavors. It's Baskin Robbins out there, so you can't.
Yeah. Well, it's cool too, because like we talked to the director of the entrepreneurship program at Babson, which is an insanely awesome. Probably the best entrepreneurship program. 100%. Right? And like, so if you really want to be an entrepreneur and you can get into Harvard or you get into, you don't even look at Babson, like that's where you go. That's the fit, and it's not for everybody. Like I'm not saying that. I'm just saying people leave out the schools that actually are really good at for what they want, and if they have that passion, direction, like be smart.
Well, and I have to bring the story up because it was from I think it was I can't remember, but he was talking about one of his students was a broadcaster, and he was going to transfer to Syracuse, because Syracuse is known for their communication, their broadcasting. And he basically told him, well, if you go there, look at all the competition you're going to have, who you're going to be competing against. You already have a job where you're broadcasting for the college on TV, and you're a sophomore. You're going to have 2 years of material,
standing in line.
And then this student is now was just announcing like the World Cup, like the under 18 World Cup on ESPN. And who knows if he went to the best communication school in the country, if that would have come, because again, the fit is what we have to focus on. It's not that story. I thought was such a home run to understand that just because you didn't go to what's other people known as the best, there was a best fit for you. And that's where the journey really has to end up getting you to.
I think you mentioned Babson. I love Babson. I think what they do well is they know who they are, and they focus on that. They don't get distracted. Everyone else is trying to be, we want to funnel people into consulting. We want to funnel them into finance. We want to funnel them into startup. What you're going to get at Babson, and they're not thinking about, going into other areas. Each year they're like number 1 in entrepreneurship. I'm going back to the rankings, and I hate them as much as you do, but it is. But they're always, considered one of the top entrepreneurship schools, and they play to that, laser focus on that, and that makes them very unique and very easy to find fit for Babson, right? If you want the network, you want the support, you want the faculty, you want to focus on entrepreneurship, Babson's a great fit. If you want the brand, maybe some of these other business schools are a better fit. Or if you don't know, you need to be in a program that's going to help you find your path. Then other universities are better. But that's great. I know we're coming up to our.
Yeah, we're about out of time here.
I say if you're wishy-washy, Babson's not the school. Yeah, because there's no changing majors. There's no that's it. That's the program, and they'll tell you, no, if you're not sure what you want to do, we're not the school for you. They'll come out and say it. It's
like a trade school for entrepreneurship. You don't go to electronics if you're a plumber, right? You know what you want. You're going to be surrounded by people who are really going to help you focus on that. Yeah. But I'll be honest, a lot of MBAs. Applicants are looking to pivot their career, and they're trying to figure out they need to be a place they can look at strategy, they can look at consulting, they can look at finance, they can look at accounting, they can look at leadership, and they need to be in a program that offers that diversity. And it just goes back to say that it's all about fit. You got to know what you want and know what they offer and find a good match without the brand. Don't consider the brand. So.
Awesome stuff. I love it. Shaun Carver, the executive director of the iHouse at the University of California, Berkeley. Thank you so much for your time. This has been College Knowledge, everyone. Thanks for listening in. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We can send your student to the school of their dreams and send you to your dream retirement. Visit us at elitecollegiateplanning.com to get started.